From satellite to spotlight. My experience in the Party Poker Million tournament. After sharpening my skills at the $10 tournament tables on partypoker.com for about 6 months, back in 2006, I decided to enter a few larger events. One particular tourney that interested me was the Party Poker Million, in which, for a $600 buy-in, players have a chance to win part of a $1 million payout. Not really wanting to fork over the $600, plus $40 for the house, though I entered a satellite tournament 3 days earlier. I paid the $30 plus $3 entry fee, played flawlessly against 174 other players, and eventually won the tournament and earned my pass to the big show. At the time, there were only 450 players registered for the $1 million tournament, and 250th place would pay a minimum of $1,000. On the day of the event, I left work late and didn't sit down at my home computer until 20 minutes into the tournament. To my great surprise, an additional 1,800 people had apparently paid the full $640 for a crack at the $274,000 top prize. I settled in for what promised to be a fairly long evening, but not before making the mistake of telling my wife that I expected to win some big cash that night. My wife actually watched the first hour of play and saw my chip stack grow from 1,500 chips to nearly 46,000. When she eventually left the room, with yours truly in 6th place overall, she smiled. I'm sure she was pondering which to buy first, a car or kitchen cabinets. During each hourly break, I would update my wife and mother-in-law as to my current status, and they would advise me on how they might spend my winnings. After the second hour of the tournament, I'd slip back down to 11th place, out of 942. After the third hour, however, I'd work my way back up to 5th place, out of 612. By the end of 4 hours of play, I was second out of 319 and had been moved to table number 1. At this point, I could have simply hit the post big blind and fold button, turned off the computer, gone to bed, and woken in the morning to a 10th place finish, and an extra $39,000 to my name. But of course, I didn't. Instead, I started stealing pots right and left because I was the bully, and other players merely wanted to hang around to get their grand by finishing in the top 250. At the hour 5 break, I announced to my wife that I was just 4,000 chips out of first place, and there were only 259 players remaining. On the first hand after the break, I was dealt pocket queens in the big blind position. After a small raise was called by 3 players, I re-raised a modest sum. All but one of the other players called. As the flop came queen, 10, 7 rainbow, I banged my knee painfully on a nearby filing cabinet. I was too excited to pay any attention to the pain though. My heart was pounding and I was sweating, breathing fast and basically jumping all around. It was probably good that I was playing online, rather than in a casino. The player next to me made a sizable bet and everyone else folded around to me. I slow played my trips by calling. The turn card was another 10, prompting my opponent to make the same sizable bet he'd previously made. I figured him for trip 10s, but since I now had a queens over full house, I went all in. He called and flipped over his queen 10. As I celebrated my impending victory, he typed in the obligatory GG, good game. But then lightning struck. The river produced yet another 10, and suddenly he had quads. Just like that, I lost half my stack and was knocked down to 27th place. Although I was obviously disappointed, I thought to myself, well, I'm still in the running for $10,000, and anyway, the night is still young. I was immediately reassured when on the very next hand I was dealt aces. Unfortunately, everyone folded to my tiny trapping raise. But a win is a win, and I'd protected my small blind. Amazingly enough, I was dealt another high pair, jacks, on the following hand. I raised and 3 people called. The flop was King Jack 4. I stared in disbelief. I had trips once again, with a chance to regain my stack. The player to my left, the chip leader at the moment, made a decent-sized bet and put his neighbor all in. I just called. I felt a real rush of adrenaline when the turn card produced my 4th jack. The player to my left bet, and I quickly called all in. I'd figured him correctly for a kings over full house. A quick chip count revealed that I was going to nearly triple up and become the new chip leader in the tourney. I was just 1 card away from being rich again. Then the final card appeared and completely ruined my night. You guessed it, my opponent's fourth king. For the second time in 3 hands, I had been beaten by quads. Not only had the golden prospect of winning $274,000 been rudely snatched away from me, but I didn't win $39,000 for 10th place either. In fact, I was knocked out of the tourney in 253rd place and shockingly finished entirely out of the money. I didn't even walk away with the $1,000 that I was sure of getting. Yet, as devastating as my 2 bad beats were, they were nothing compared to the verbal bad beatings I received after telling my wife and her mom what had just happened to their money. There was one tiny silver lining to having the distinction of getting beat by quads twice in 3 hands, and dropping from the chip lead, well almost, to out of the entire tournament and missing the money. There was a website way back then called badbeats.com. My story was selected as the Bad Beats Story of the Month and published in February 2006. As a reward for that, I soon received in the mail a package containing a hat, a t-shirt, and a check for $250. Only 1/1000th the size I was hoping to have won.